we started this series on Eulogy virtues last week, and one of the things that came up was I found out a bunch of guys from last year's freshman class. They had said that as freshmen, they got together, they're part of the same Bible study, and they planned their funerals last year, their freshman year. And I thought, that is hilarious. I asked them about it, and they're like, yeah, no, we picked our readings, we picked our songs. I asked if they actually wrote out their own eulogies or eulogies for each other. They didn't do that part, but they did ask, here's how many masses we want said for the repose of our souls. I'm like, you guys are ahead of the curve. This is awesome. So, and one of the reasons behind this is the reason we started this whole series in the first place, which is we want to begin with the end in mind. That whole idea that here's these freshman guys who, at the very beginning of their college careers, are like, no, I know that I'm going to spend a lot of my life living for my resume. I'm going to spend a lot of my life living for these accomplishments and these achievements. I'm going to try to do all these things. I have a bucket list of stuff I want to accomplish. But ultimately, no matter all those things I live for, it's the eulogy virtues that I'm going to be left with. It's what they say about me at my funeral. That's what I'm going to be left with. And again, we just brought this up last week, but we're talking about it again for the next few weeks. So many of us, we live for the resume virtues, those accomplishments, those achievements, those goals. They're not bad, but what we're left with is the eulogy virtues. I just am thinking about that. Like, in the end, that's what we're left with. Lou Holtz was a football coach. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. At one point, he told the story about how he and his wife, they had a massive fire in their home, and it literally burned everything they owned to the ground. They lost 100% of their worldly possessions. He said, we stood outside of our home and watched it burn to the ground, completely destroyed. After the fire was put out, finally, he said he turned to his wife and he said, okay, we can cry for a day. We can cry for 24 hours. But after that, we have to move on. Like, we get to be sad, but we're only gonna be sad for 24 hours. Because he said, we didn't lose anything in the fire that we were gonna take with us to heaven anyway. They lost everything they owned. But he said, we didn't lose anything in the fire that we were going to take with us to heaven anyway. Because at the end of our lives, that's what we're left with. What are we going to bring with us to heaven? That's why, the eulogy is given at a funeral. Eulogy, actually the etymology of the term eulogy, it simply means good words. The good words that are spoken at a person's funeral. Which brings up a point, which is the difference between reputation and character. You've probably heard this before, but reputation is what others think about you. Your character is who you really are. My reputation is what other people think about me, but my character is who I actually am. Who we have actually become. It's because that's what we're left with. Not reputation. Reputation can come and go. That doesn't really matter. But character, who we really are, that's what we're left with. That's what I think I'm referring to when we talk about eulogy virtues. And the reason why we're talking about this now, again, the reason why those freshman guys had planned their funerals is because I can't always work on my resume stuff. I can't always work on my accomplishments, achievements. I can't always check things off my bucket list because of circumstances, because of opportunities. I might not be able to, if I want to start a business, right now might not be the time. If I want to start a family, right now might not be the time. If I want to start any endeavor, travel, do anything off of that list, off that resume list, I might not be able to do that now. Also, there might be other things that are happening. Like, I don't know, economies might collapse. There might be a worldwide pandemic that shuts things down. But I can always work on my character. I might not always be able to advance that resume, but I can always work on the eulogy. In fact, it's the one thing I don't have to wait to work on. Also, I think this is really cool. You don't have to ask anyone's permission to begin growing in character. And even if someone is trying to hold you back, even if someone's not helping you, they can do nothing to affect your character. They cannot thwart your growth in this. That's why I think that one of the things is when we grow in character, we're doing that now. In fact, that's what growth in character is. It's making the decision now of who I will be later. And whether we're intentional with that or accidental with that, it doesn't matter. Because I'm making the decision now of who I'll be later. If I'm intentional, hopefully I'll be someone I want to be later. And if I'm accidental, I might end up being someone I don't want to be later. It's one of the reasons I think the great Russian author Dostoevsky, he once said this. He said, it seems, in fact, that the second half of a person's life is made up of nothing but the habits they accumulated during the first half. Seems that the second half of a person's life is made up of nothing but the habits they accumulated during the first half. And that's why we're talking about character now. That's why we're talking about eulogy now. Because I think what it is to have character is to be the kind of person who does the right thing. It's very, very simple. If I have a good character, I'm someone who does the right thing. Or another way to say it is, I do what I said I would do. Like again, we all know this about a person with character, a person we respect, a person we admire, is a lot of times that is there. They simply do what they said they would do. And out of all the eulogy virtues that we could possibly talk about, I think one stands out today, and it's loyalty. And think about how many times at a funeral, if you've ever been there, where people stand up or they stand around and they're talking and they're like, yeah, man, he was someone, he kept his promises. He was someone, you knew that he would show up. All I know about her is she was there when we needed her. Even something like this, just something as simple as she was a good friend. That's what it is to be loyal. It's again, you did what you said you would do. That's someone with a good character. Someone, I did what I said I would do. Doing what we said we would do was really important for my parents. So important for my parents. What I mean by that is, if we ever signed up for anything growing up, we had to finish it. Doesn't matter if we hated it. Doesn't matter if we were awful at it. If we signed up for it, we had to. We did not get to quit ever. If we signed up, we had to finish. And there's no questions about this. So I was in swimming because all of us were in swimming, and I was horrible. I was the slowest kid in the slowest lane, like every practice, every single time we showed up. And I hated it so much. But my mom, she's like, no, you signed up for swimming. You can't quit. And so eventually I got a little better. But I remember one day in particular, it was a summer day. I think it was in 5th grade. And the Olympics had been on. And so like at the high school, they offered gymnastics for kids at my age. And I was like, yes, I totally want to be in gymnastics. I want to, all those things those guys were doing, they were jacked and they were doing all these incredible flips and all these kind of things on the rings, on the bars. Like I am 100% signing up for gymnastics. So I did sign up for gymnastics. And that Monday morning came, my mom drove me to the high school. I walked in, she dropped me off. I walked in, walked down the stairs and walked into the gym. Now the gym was massive. It was like 4 full-size basketball courts, just wide open, and it was packed. So many kids who were ready to do gymnastics. And I looked around of this gym full of kids and realized very, very quickly that there was only one boy, and that was me. And I remember I opened up the door, I looked around, and I was like, nope. And I shut the door and I walked home over a mile and a half back to my parents' place. And my mom was like, why are you back so soon? I was like, Mom, I am not going back there. She's like, what's wrong? I was like, I'm the only boy. She's like, get in the car. I'm like, no, please. They get in the car. Like, Mom, you can't make me do this. She couldn't make me do this. So she brought me back, brought me up to the coach. She's like, this is Mike. He's really nervous about the only boy here. Mr. Maris, great coach. He's like, don't worry, we'll teach you how to do a bunch of stuff. So now I can do a round off and a front handspring. But it was, the whole thing was this. There's something virtuous about that my parents are trying to instill in not just me, but in all of us, this goodness of loyalty. Do what you said you would do. And loyalty to family too. I mean, I don't know how many times my dad had said, listen, if you're on the playground at school and someone's picking on your brother or on your sister, you not only have our permission to get involved, you had better get involved. You had better help them. You had better fight for them. So there's something good about loyalty. Again, hopefully your experience has been like the positive parts of loyalty, but there's also at the same time, we realize there's limitations of loyalty. That loyalty has its limitations. I may never give absolute loyalty to anything less than absolute reality. I want to say that again. I may never give absolute loyalty to anything less than absolute reality. So we know this, family, it's a good. But it is not an absolute good. And life is a good, but life is not an absolute good. And friendship is a good, but friendship is not an absolute good. I mean, I've heard it said that a good friend will help you move, and a really good friend will help you move the body. but it's not an absolute good, so that's not the case. So loyalty is an executive virtue. What I mean by that is it needs other more foundational virtues in its execution. So to actually do loyalty well, we need justice. To do loyalty well, we need compassion. To do loyalty well, we need prudence. So if a family member of mine had committed a crime and I knew it and I was subpoenaed, then Justice has a greater claim on my loyalty than family does. There's a limitation to loyalty. And this is so interesting. Jesus knows this. I mean, think about Jesus' context. In the gospel today, he is a Jew. In the Old Testament is full of family. It's full of family loyalty. I mean, think about this. Who are the Jewish people? They're a family coming from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is the family of God, the people of God. That's the covenant of God is extended to a family. And not only that, but even the 10 Commandments. You know, the first 3 are all about God, but the last 6 commandments about how we deal with other people, the first one of those is all about family. And into that, Jesus says, okay, yeah, we know how good family is, but it's not an absolute good. If you come to me without hating your father, mother, brother, sister, wife, can't be my disciple. Why? Because Jesus is saying those other things, while they're goods, they're not absolute goods. And in that moment, Jesus is making an absolute claim to our loyalty because there are limitations to our loyalty. I may never give an absolute loyalty to anything less than absolute reality. But at the same time, not only are there limitations to loyalty, there's liberation of loyalty. There's the freedom of loyalty. In fact, I heard it defined that loyalty is this. Loyalty is a force that conquers time. That is to say, change and transition. Loyalty is a force that conquers time. How many times have you heard of a married couple who, after how many years of being married, they say, yeah, but they're not the same person I married. They're someone different. They've changed. We've changed. I've changed. We've grown apart. Of course, that happens. But loyalty is a force that conquers that. Loyalty is a force that conquers change and transition. Even dramatic and almost instantaneous change and transition. So I know of a couple, a man and woman not far from here, that a number of years ago they met, they fell in love. They were married less than 2 years ago. And relatively recently, the bride was in a car accident and she suffered a pretty significant traumatic brain injury. And she's not the same. She doesn't think the same. She doesn't talk the same. She doesn't act the same. She's changed. But she and her husband are married. That hasn't changed. Loyalty is a force that conquers time. Loyalty is a force that conquers change and transition. I mean, think about this. At their wedding, what did they say? I will love and honor you all the days of my life. What? For richer or for poorer, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. Here is sickness. Less than 2 years married, the rest of their lives ahead of them. But loyalty is a force that conquers time. That's why there's the liberation of loyalty. Now, I've said this so many times that it's probably sick of hearing me say this, that on a couple's wedding day, it seems strange that on a couple's wedding day, that's the day that they vow to love and honor each other. Because you think, of course you're going to love and honor each other that day. You're in love. You're getting married today. Of course you're going to love each other. Of course you're going to honor each other. But they're not making that vow that day for that day. They're making the vow that day because then they know that the day is coming when they won't want to keep that vow. They know the day is coming when I won't want to love you, when I won't want to honor you, when I won't want to choose you. And basically what they're saying is, when that day comes, I will. Again, that's what loyalty is, a force that conquers time. That's the reason why the vow is being made. And that is the liberation of loyalty. Why? Because I've already decided. No matter what happens in our relationship, no matter what happens in my life, that's a question I don't have to ask. Should I stay or should I go? I don't have to ask that question. That's been answered. That's been decided. That's been settled. I do get to ask the question of how can we make this better? I do get to ask the question of, okay, we've drifted apart. How are we going to make this work? I do get to ask the question of, how can I love this person as we now are different? But the liberation of loyalty means I don't have to ask the question, should I stay or go? Because that's already been decided. Loyalty means remaining true to our responsibility in spite of loss or danger. Loyalty means remaining true to the responsibility, true to that vow, true to that promise, despite the loss or danger. People can say, well, I said I would, but the circumstances have changed now. I said I would do this, but I didn't realize it would cost me so much. Hey, this cost more than I planned, and so now I want to change my answer. But here's the question. In that moment, we have to ask the question, who do I want to be? I want to change my answer. Okay, pause for a second. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be talked about at your eulogy, in your eulogy, at your funeral? What kind of character do you want to have? And this of course, starts not just in big ways, it starts in small ways. It's the thing that so many of us are plagued by, where it's like, okay, I know I said I would do that thing with you this weekend, but something better has come along. Okay, but I said I would. We have that in small ways like that. We also have it in big ways. That's, I think, one of the reasons why Jesus in the gospel today not only says, okay, loyalty to family and friends, fine and everything, but he has absolute claim on our loyalty. He goes on to say that, okay, think about this. Weigh it out. Who, before they constructed a tower, wouldn't sit down and see if they have the resources to finish? Who, when going into battle, wouldn't weigh it out and say, how much would this cost if I have 10,000 troops against an army with 20,000 troops? Basically, realizing this is a big decision. How much am I willing to pay? Is it worth it? Because we realize that this loyalty, this character trait, we realize that doing the right thing will cost. It will cost something. That's why Jesus says, stop for a second. Before you make this decision to follow me with your whole life, just stop. Realize it will cost your whole life. The second reading, St. Paul's letter to Philemon, it's fascinating. It's disturbing for a lot of us because it involves these three men, right? It involves Paul, Philemon, and Onesimus. Onesimus was the slave of Philemon. Whenever we talk about slavery, it's one of those, especially in the Bible, it's one of those like really, really tense moments. So this little sidebar here. I love the fact that when we talk about slavery, as Christians, it's super tense. Why? Because for all of human history, slavery was no one would bat an eye at slavery. For all of human history, slavery was the norm. For all of human history, the idea that you could own or at least have stewardship over someone was completely normal. So when the Christian man, William Wilberforce, a couple hundred years ago, he campaigned against slavery, one of the things he wanted, he said, I don't want slavery to simply be illegal. I want it to be unthinkable. And you think, that's the triumph of Christianity. That this institution that was just taken for granted by every civilization, by every human individual, essentially almost even, throughout all of human history, is now for many of us, almost all of us, is unthinkable. Why? Because William Wilberforce and others said the Christian message is antithetical to slavery. So this is good news. At the same time, here's the difficult story. The difficult story is Philemon owns Onesimus. Onesimus runs away, maybe steals some stuff from Philemon. He gets to Rome and he meets Paul. Philemon was a Christian. Onesimus wasn't. Onesimus meets Paul and he encounters Jesus. He gives his whole life to the Lord. He becomes a Catholic. He gets baptized. And then he's living and working with Paul. But there's some unfinished business here. And Paul realizes that, okay, Onesimus, yes, while the institution of slavery is not a good thing, well, Philemon, owning you is not a good thing. You have to go back. You can imagine Onesimus in that moment having all those excuses, all those reasons, and not even bad reasons, but good reasons of reasons why I shouldn't go back. But ultimately, he went back freely. And in the letter of St. Paul today, St. Paul is saying, okay, Philemon, when Onesimus comes back, things are different. He said, I'm not sending him back to you as your slave. I'm sending him back to you as your brother. Now again, for Philemon, it'd be really easy for him to say, well, no. See, the propriety would mean that I have to take him back, but as a slave, because he was my slave, and he ran away and stole from me and everything. But Paul's like, no. Your loyalty, not just Onesimus's, but Philemon, your loyalty is to Jesus. So when this man, who used to be your slave, shows up, he's now your brother. Think about what that costs. Here's someone who shows up that you don't trust in necessarily anymore. But now they actually live in your home, not as your servant, not as an employee, not as a slave for sure. They live in your home as family, because the one who has made an absolute claim on your loyalty has made this one your family. So this is what it costs to let the Lord have our loyalty. Last thing. Years ago, this man told me this story about a man he met through prison fellowship. This individual, he had a pretty successful life, but one night, he was not Christian. One night, he has a wife and he had kids. He was out, he was drinking late at night, and he was driving. And he hit someone while driving drunk, killed them, and drove off. It was a hit and run. He got away with it, essentially. I mean, no one ever found out. Moved on years later. No one ever found the family of this individual that he killed. Never found out, never had justice for their daughter, never had justice for their family member, for the people they loved. Years later, this man, he actually encountered Jesus and became a Christian. And it'd be easy for him to say, well, the Lord has erased all my sins. Like, I've been baptized now and all the sins are gone. But he knew the reality. He knew the kind of person he wanted to be. Now, no one knew this. No one knew. So his reputation was intact, but his character, that's what he knew he'd be left with. So the first person he talked to his pastor, talked to his wife, talked to their children. And they made the arrangements, and he went down to the police station and he turned himself in. Wanted to give justice to that family. He couldn't give that family their daughter back. But maybe he could give them some kind of peace of mind. He couldn't repay society what he owed, but maybe he could actually stand up and say, okay, but I can at least do what I can. He lost a lot. Just like I'm sure Philemon lost and Onesimus lost, and just like every person who has said, okay, I said I would do this, so now I'm going to do what I said. Because no matter what we lose, it's what we're left with that counts. No matter how many resume virtues, no matter how many accomplishments, no matter how many achievements, no matter how much stuff we have that gets taken away and we're without at the end of our lives. It's the eulogy virtues that we're left with. It's who we are that we're left with. It's that character that we're left with. And it's the one who has made an absolute claim on our loyalty, Jesus Christ. He's the one that we're left with.